Um, I was part of the people that carried out interviews with different demographics, CSO, students, women, to understand how all that is happening affects them or what it helps their perceptions on democracy. And we definitely understand that it is not good. A lot of people feel powerless. A lot of people feel like their votes do not count. A lot of people, because of these things, don't feel like there's no point even trying to do the right thing, go out to vote and exercise their civic duties. It feels like whenever or whatever happens on the field is still going to be redetermined in the courts, which might not represent popular opinion. And therefore, there's just a general, one of the biggest we see is an apathy, and we also see a distrust for the courts. And that is a very big problem, because if the courts are meant to be the last hope for the common man, and even people don't feel like they can get justice, it means that slowly but surely the legitimacy of the democracy, of the government, of the institutions are eroding. And those erosions over time can lead to room for anarchy. People would want to take matters into their own hands. People would want to be government of themselves, because the legitimacy of those institutions supposed to be rightfully put in place is eroding. So those are some of the effects that these things can have on our democracy. And Nigeria is in such a sensitive place right now that it will not be a good idea to let this happen.
Okay, and from your findings during this research, will you say that the judiciary is completely free from political parties' influence and the executive interference?
Quite the opposite, actually. I think from our findings, we see that there is an issue, and there is the reality that politics is getting into the places, the sacrosanct institutions that are supposed to be devoid of politics. The judiciary was supposed to be it's supposed to be an organ governed by law only. It is the fact, it is the law, and it is their place to adjudicate on it and to say what it is. Of course, we run a common law system where they too can make laws in their own right through their determination of cases to properly kind of make sure the laws are bound and there is the rule of law in a nation. But that is no longer the case. I think we cannot take the judiciary away from the context of Nigeria. And as much as we have tried, as much as the judiciary has tried, it is sad to see that politics is slowly, definitely coming into the judiciary, a place that this is not supposed to be. A lot of our findings, we also mentioned the ICPC's finding of the fact that between 2018 and 2020, there has been at least 9-point-something billion naira spent for cases to kind of get favorable judgments here and there in the judiciary. So that is definitely a clear indicator that political movements have definitely found their way to penetrate into the judiciary.
Can you be kind enough to just give us some specific examples of where political parties influence the judiciary to get favorable results?
I think I would give one. If you look in the report we had, there was a clear case study that we put, and it was a case, two different cases in two different places on similar grounds that were adjudged differently. And a lot of the information, there was a WikiLeaks on that particular case, and a lot of the information showed that the judge involved was paid to actually rule different ways because of the political affiliations in those cases. It was a case in, sorry, the details are not, I will just give the general summary. So the case was about the INEC, the list that INEC submitted. So in the law, basically, there was a set date through which if the names on that list those were the only people that were allowed to contest for the elections. And then in one case, it was PDP. And I think in that case, they ruled that even if the name came after the time set by INEC, the person was still legally allowed to be a part of the elections. And some days later, the same issue was ruled against simply because the person who they wanted to come in was someone that a godfather did not want to come into it. I'll put the report in the link for anyone who might want to read. It's very interesting, but that was one case then, and it was fairly recent, not up to 2 years ago, that it was clearly shown that definitely the political maneuverings that happen everywhere else is also finding its way into the judiciary.
Now, let me just ask for about this popular case. In the case of the Imo State elections, where the candidate concluded as fourth position by the INEC was declared winner by the court, will you say that the judiciary might have been influenced in this particular instance?
It is hard to say what caused this, or it was influenced or not, simply because if I do not have evidence to it, it's anything I would say would be pure hearsay. But that case we actually did bring out in the report as well. And our findings show that the conclusions reached are not what we understand to be just based off of law. Of course, there are some key issues because the case had gone through several courts. It had gone to the state court, it had gone to Court of Appeal before it reached the Supreme Court. Some of the issues along the way were not taken in the Supreme Court. Some of the issues that were tried by the Court of Appeal and the lower courts were not, the Supreme Court did not have power to listen to those issues. The only issues brought before it was the exclusion of the votes from those 388 polls. So there are many parts to that case that honestly, the evidence doesn't support the judgment, but I also appreciate that because of these little things that might have happened in the process, they might have reached that conclusion. I am not a judge to say what is or what is not, but I think the evidence speaks for itself, and it is a bit confusing to understand how that was done. But I would say this, posterity will judge the judgment, and I think definitely it is not over, because even though we are going to pass the circle and the importance of it right now might seem to fade, I think a future will come where these cases would have to be looked into once more. As for the reason why this judgment came, there is law backing it. But how the law was used in this case was a bit, it definitely does have some underpinnings of some influence, but I cannot categorically say who is influencing what or where it came from. It's just definitely, it is a judgment that we will still end up looking into at some point in Nigeria's democracy. That is for sure. It has definitely, yeah, that's as most I can say about that case.
All right, thank you. And remember that you can join the conversation simply by raising up your digital hand. I'll try to accommodate as much questions and comments as possible. Now, looking at INEC, should INEC be strengthened to prosecute cases arising from elections and form tribunals, right, rather than the judiciary?
That I do not agree with. I think INEC's role has been clearly stated out in the Constitution, and the INEC is supposed to be an umpire. I think giving INEC the right to be someone who constitutes courts and listens to cases that come up from its elections is the same thing as giving INEC the right to be judge and jury in its own case, which might end up leading you to the issues you might be trying to run away from that you see in the judiciary. Do I believe INEC needs to be strengthened on so many levels? Absolutely. And I think that is some of the things this new amendment to the Electoral Act is trying to do by creating, by allowing things like electronic transmission of votes, which would definitely give INEC more power to really give definite answers to many questions that come up in court. But I think the court's role, you cannot take it away. I don't think the answer is excluding the judiciary from the electoral process in order for us to feel like the process is better. I feel like the judiciary's role is pivotal because we've seen in history, like in the cases with Peter Obi, even with Adams Oshomole, the judiciary has played that role of making sure that popular candidates and also the justice is done in electoral cases in a way that INEC, political parties, and more could never have done. It's just that right now we are in dire straits to the judiciary, which has shown that there's a need to interrogate the judiciary, there's a need to advocate with the judiciary, and there's a need to definitely work with the judiciary better. But you cannot take away the judiciary's role of adjudicating cases. It's kind of like, it will not do well. I think they already have a precedent. It is their role according to the Constitution. So it's a situation of maybe just better working with the judiciary, creating better laws to make sure that we are plugging up holes that allow these things to happen. Yes, that's what I think.
Now, do you support the sentiments that believe that the president of the country should not be allowed to appoint the attorney general, as this causes an interference in the judiciary process? Do you support that?
Ever since I was in law school, I remember having the class about it when they said it is the attorney general is almost an executive position appointed by the president, and I did not think that was a good idea. I think a lot of the issues we are seeing now in the judiciary is because there is serious executive interference in the judiciary. The fact that the president is the one who appoints, although even if it's by the recommendations of the NJC and the Federal Judicial Service Commission, there has been too much power given to the other arms of government on the judiciary that has kind of crippled its abilities to do its work properly. You've been seeing the strikes from JUSUN, the fact that they are not being paid right, the fact that the judiciary, even though it's such an important and integral arm of the government, is very underpaid. It's definitely proof that leaving a lot of integral things that concern the judiciary in executive arms is going to hamper its ability to be independent. So there's definitely a need to maybe look into how a lot of the roles concerning administration of the judiciary, remuneration of the judiciary, and much more are carried out in order to make sure the judiciary is really independent.
All right, remember that you can join this conversation simply by raising the digital hand. We'll try to accommodate as much questions and comments as possible. Now, we have seen a lot of cases where the judiciary eventually decide electoral contests. Is this a good thing where the people would finish voting and the judges end up deciding who occupy political offices?
I think when the fathers of democracy were thinking through democracy, many did not expect the realities we see today. Democracy has always meant to be settled by voting. It is the point. Elections give power to the people to really show that power in a democracy is with the people, and that is by their vote. So the reality that a lot of things in Nigeria, we are very adversarial, and it always ends up going to court simply because there are deficiencies in many other sectors that concern elections that are still in process. It definitely, I can imagine it is a very big blow on that feeling of being in a democratic nation. It is a big blow to your willingness to participate. And it is, the ideal would be to have less of the judiciary involved and it be a situation between INEC, the political parties, and the people. But the reality, we cannot run away from the reality that there are too many gaps, there are too many shortcomings that allow or create a need for the judiciary to come in. But good news, luckily, there is work going on in various sectors to kind of improve the ability for things to be determined on the ground so that less and less need is coming to judiciary. I know there have been a lot of support to improve alternative dispute resolution so that political parties and politicians do not find the need to keep on coming to court to settle their differences. So it's a work in progress. We are a 60-plus-year-old democracy, and we have a lot to learn, and we have a lot of things we need to understand and get right before we can get to those ideal levels of democratic practice. So for now, it's what we have, and we just have to work with it till we get to where we are going to, I believe.
Now, in your own opinion, how then can we strengthen our electoral process to avoid the usual litigations we see after every single elections?
I see. I think the first and foremost is for us to be more active. And don't get me wrong, I believe Nigerians are very politically active when it comes to campaigning, when it comes to putting out our opinion on social medias and our news platforms. We are always there, but we see the issues come in where it comes to the most important places. Nigerians and people in political parties have almost sidelined themselves within the structures, or they have been sidelined. Maybe it is not them that wanted it so. So ownership within political parties is almost becoming non-existent. It is those with the money that dictate the tune. Those things need to change. There is the reality that poverty makes it so easy for people to want to sell their votes. But the reality is that selling of your votes leads to a lot of the issues we see today. So it's not a one size fits all. And I know where am I doing this to saying anything I'm saying to cast blame. But I think we need to improve our laws, which is something we are already on. So that is good. That is hopeful. We need to definitely improve our voters' education to really take these issues to the grassroots in innovative and creative ways to help people understand that power really belongs to them and it is theirs to exercise should they choose to rise above some of the things we know, the Nigerian factor. And I think another way is definitely getting your PVCs and trying to be active in political parties. There is no other way we can do this. A lot of the political parties are run by a few for the many, and that shouldn't be. Even in political parties that are not winning elections per se, we've forgotten that political parties also play a very integral role in the electoral health of the nation by being democratic schools. Many have forgotten that role to teach people, to build people up, and most times just focus on elections and winning elections simply because of the gains that come with those seats. So there's many ways we can go about it, and there's definitely a need to be more organized with the way we do things. But I think the best one I can give or I can say is to get involved and make everybody try to get involved, else we would be singing to the choir.
All right, I can see that Mr. Daniel Elumba's hand is up. Mr. Elumba, you have a question.
My question is, right from 1999, when we have the first presidential contest, it has always been that eventually the judiciary ends up deciding the process. That's have been the same with other governorships electoral. For the past 22 years, most electoral contests end up being decided in the courts. So obviously, have there been any improvement? If the past 20 years have been like this, what do you think will be the situation in the next 20 years as well?
Thank you so much for that question. And I do agree that the reality of our history leaves a lot to be desired. That has been because of the gains from political office and this do or die political idea we have about politics. It's no wonder that the judiciary is always called into these things. It's only in a few cases, like with the election which Jonathan was involved in 2015, that we saw some people just handing off and allowing goodwill to rule and letting whatever came out of the ballot be of the ballot. But one thing that has me very hopeful is that hopefully we've transmitted the new Electoral Act, which also has transmission of votes electronically in it. If it is to be signed by the president, that would give a lot of power to INEC to clearly state who wins elections. And it can be it could be game-changing for Nigerian politics. And that makes me hopeful. I cannot tell the future, but I know with changes like this, there's so much to look forward to. Because if all votes are transparent and everybody can see what happens, then less and less you might have issues that we need to take to court to say this happened and this did not happen. Secondly, I feel the fact that more and more people are getting enlightened and there are now more and more local observers of elections, we have the ability to truly say what happened at polling units, which can give us a very good advantage in the claims that may end up going to court. So things like that make me hopeful for the future of having a situation where we would have less and less need to go to the judiciary to sort out issues that can easily be handled. So if someone, for example, comes and says, oh, this polling unit, there wasn't a lot of violence, but it was excluded, we have proof. It's no longer so they go and create their own evidence and bring to court. It is clear for everyone to see, and that can highly not be disputed. Also, the fact that we are moving more and more into embracing technology is proof that there is room for more transparency to grow as long as we get it right. So they keep me hopeful, but of course, I cannot say for sure what the future holds. But I know that there's great intervention. There's a lot of money being poured into helping improving this system. There's a lot of awareness being raised, and a lot of the younger generation are becoming more and more politically active and sensitive. So to me, all those little changes happening, I believe, will soon or one day come together to create a democratic system we can all be proud of and we can all trust. Of course, it takes time, but it's hopeful.
Mr. Enomba, your hand is still up.
Yes, in the course of your questions, you also said something about politicians viewing electoral contest as a do or die affair. So do you think part of the solutions will be to lessen the attractiveness of political offices? And if that was so, how could that be achieved?
Absolutely. I think that is something that has come up in every space I have been in. And I feel like it is one of the greatest ways to help relieve us of some of these issues we see. The fact and the reality that a lot of these political places and political positions are far too glamorous is a problem. Everybody thinks that to be the richest man in the land, you need to be a politician. The only issue is that the people to make the laws to change these things are the same people benefiting from it. So how exactly we can make sure or get this to work, it still boils down to the vote. It is that we need to start we need to start training people with better values and more selfless feelings towards the nation and getting them into those places of power. It is that we need the people who feel that they can actively stand by these ideas, are put in political parties, are allowed to run, and are voted for at the primaries to run for these elections. We have a change in the electoral law, which is going to allow for direct primaries and completely outlaw indirect primaries, which have been a great source of contention within political parties themselves for the choosing of leaders from the parties to the people. So I am excited about that simply because I feel it levels the playing field a little bit more to have people that we really want to lead us. So I feel like these are things, as I say, they are seeds in time that we may not reap the benefit of right now. But I believe if we keep on going in this trajectory, it is only a matter of time before we get what we want. It's going to take time. I think one thing I've learned being in this sector is the appreciation that it is not a day's job. It is not a 10 years job. It is a long time coming. But more and more people are getting involved. I am seeing more and more voices trying to be leaders. And that is truly what we need. Just people with better values coming into those places so that together we can say, okay, maybe this is too much money to be made from being a legislator. Let's have that. And then it becomes less lucrative and more about service.
All right. Ask this final question, please, if you don't mind. I can see that part of your solutions is much more about legislative action towards amending changing the electoral process, educating the citizenry. But if the talk is about the judiciary, sometimes giving conflicting decisions in similar electoral issues, without putting you on the spot, if you don't mind, is there any way we can also reform the judiciary in your thoughts to see an improvement where some of these conflicting issues are removed to give more confidence to Nigerians in the judicial process, and then also give more confidence to Nigerians in the electoral process? Is there any suggested judicial reforms in your mind?
Thank you so much for that question. Apologies. Everything I said, I agree, but with the judiciary, I feel like some ways we feel that this can be helped, and it is part of our report, was a lot of strengthening of the NJC. Right now, the composition of the NJC seems to be very much composed of people who might have or have the vulnerability to be for political strains and political games to come into it. In fact, our chief judge is appointed by the president and some of the other members of the body. So I'm think one way we think is definitely strengthening the judiciary, which will include maybe having a look into how we constitute the NJC, which is supposed to be the governing arm of the judiciary, of the bench, sorry, to better see how we can make sure we have an NJC that can be independent, devoid of politics, and can properly just be working towards the law. That is one way. Second issue I have found, and this was not clearly reflected in the report, was something that came up. We realized that the practice of the judiciary is to have members of the from the courts. So there's almost a bit of a gag order, if I can say that. Maybe it's not as deep, but there's almost a gag order. The judiciary, members of the judiciary can't speak except they are on the bench. And this has caused a lot of trouble because you have so many cases coming against them, and many cannot speak to some of these issues except they are on the panel with the NJC. And even if there are issues where maybe the media can come in and we could work together, because they cannot speak, it is problematic. So I think another way I feel that we can really work with the judiciary to help improve things is to find better ways to collaborate with the judiciary, find ways we can work around their own practices to enable them have a voice. Another way I think, again, so this is my third opinion, is the NBA can be strengthened to do more on behalf of the courts. The NBA is supposed to be the arm that is it's like almost the mouthpiece of the judiciary. It is the body of lawyers. It is the lawyers speaking on laws and trying to like get into it. We feel that maybe by improving their capacity, or at least even shining more of a light or giving them more duties, they could help be the mouthpiece for the things the judges may not be able to say in order to really work on key issues. Because let's think about it this way. If we have a severely underpaid judiciary that has its administrators not necessarily be appointing judges that we may not want to be on the bench, or people who might have affiliations elsewhere, we are not going anywhere. But if we can better work in those issues with collaborations with the NJC, the NBA, and other bodies, we might be able to really pick at some things that allow that vulnerableness of the judiciary, and at the end of the day, help improve its quality and improve its ability to adjudicate around these cases. But one thing I do know is that this is fairly new. I think, as I said in the beginning, the judiciary has not really been looked into in terms of development and much more. So now that we have started this process, I'm sure along the way, there are many things we're going to see. There are many things we're going to start learning of, and there are many more ways we are going to have the people and interested stakeholders get involved in speaking about these issues so that we can all get to an expected end. I hope that answers your question. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. And remember that you can join the conversation simply by raising up your digital hand. Try to take as much questions and comments as possible. We are still discussing corruption and conflicting judgments in electoral process and their impact on Nigerians' democracy. Now, let's talk about the way judges are recruited. Today, we see children and wives of sitting judges and politicians being appointed as judges. We use that this nepotism is part of the problem we're having in the judiciary.
That is why I said we definitely need to do more into it, because by law, your judges are appointed through recommendations from the Federal Judicial Service Commission to the NJC, who gives this to the president to accept and then call people. I cannot tell you who every member is. The administrators of the judiciary have almost been shrouded in mystery to many extents. And that's why I believe maybe we need to start looking more into the administrators, looking deeper into how these processes are done, create advocacy routes around how we are appointing, who we are appointing, and who they are, so that Nigerians are aware. Most times you just hear judges are appointed. Most people are not even as interested in that as they are in their legislators or the ministers and much more. So definitely we have, it's clear in the constitution, but in practice, we've not really given much attention to it as we should. And those are some of the things we are hoping that in the coming years, we can help look into, at least shine a light on these things so that we all can have an understanding of how it is done. Because it's just because you have an affiliation does not, I cannot say because of that you are not fit to judge, but at least if we keep an eye on it from beginning to the end and see the cases you bring out, then it will be much easier for me to say or to understand how these things come about. So it's brand new, and I believe absolutely we need to start maybe keeping an eye on our judiciary and having an understanding of how things are happening and open it up a little bit more to the public.
Okay, now let's talk about our democracy. Do you think a democracy is mature enough, or how long do you think it would take our democracy to mature enough to trust the electoral process without the influence of the judiciary?
Now, that is very difficult to say, because even the past election, for example, in America, one of the world's leading democracies, we've seen that a lot of things did not go accordingly. Even in their elections, there's still recourse to the judiciary. In the elections with Trump, there were almost 65 cases in the judiciary against about the whole election. So I don't think there's any democracy that we have right now that may not at some point recourse to the judiciary. I don't know where that happens. I think the judiciary are necessary because it is their role to handle conflict as they come. And there's always going to be conflict in political issues because politics is tense. But in terms of when do I see Nigeria coming into a place of trusting the system to not always be on guard, I cannot say. And the reason I cannot say is because I would like you to appreciate that democracy is a system that is very dependent on its people. And we appreciate that right now, Nigeria is in a place where its values, its unity, and so much more are being called into question. So to predict when we can have that ideal democracy, I cannot really say. I just know that right now, I do not believe it may be in my lifetime. I hope it is before I die, I can see it. But I will also be honest to appreciate that I don't know if I will. But I do believe we are taking those steps towards it. And that is what keeps me hopeful. I think until we learn to really love ourselves, we cannot love the system or trust the system. And that comes from a lot of feeling heard. It comes from a lot of having more consequences for actions. And it's coming. It's been hard to get to this place, but at least we've seen situations where judges who have been called or caught for being corrupt or perverting justice. Some have been removed by the NJC. We are seeing governors, people who we believe have stolen from the country, being brought to book. It's a slow process, but there are things happening right now that do incite hope for that future that you speak about, but I cannot put it in numbers, sorry.
All right, we are almost out of time. So just before I let you go, let me ask you this. What reforms do you propose will curb the problems reflected in your research?
I think that's a very good question. The reforms I see right now, first and foremost, I stand with JUSUN and I stand with the judiciary where we speak to better remuneration for our judges. I think if we have better paid judges, there might be less incidences of having bribery in cases be appetizing because you can take care of yourself. So that will be some of the better reforms. There needs to be a way where we kind of separate the executive from key parts or key issues concerning the judiciary. That is definitely one. Another reform will be definitely to work with the NJC. And I think it's maybe not a reform on the book as much as it is just a creative way of interfacing with the NJC, but I feel like there could be better collaborations between the media and the judiciary in order to better tell the stories that need to be heard. And that could definitely help improve perceptions and also breed understanding of these issues. So it's not a reform per se as much as it is a different ethos of interaction. And another one I would definitely suggest is improving education. And this is for across the board. I'm not just talking about citizens. Even in the institutions, you need to re-educate, help everybody understand their roles, and definitely work together to teach the values we want to see. This is on it's on an individual level, and a collective level, a institutional level, even a national level. We need to start preaching the things or teaching the things we want to see, as opposed to letting this constant rigmarole of us acting like we are subjects in our own land when we are citizens. So it's not just for the judiciary, but I cannot give you just for the judiciary, because the judiciary is working in tandem with many other sectors of the society. And if you think just focusing on judiciary and saying the judiciary should change, that would give you the results you want, it doesn't work. Everybody needs to get involved with it. INEC needs to get more powers to maybe possibly prosecute crimes during elections. INEC needs more funding. INEC needs more powers to say this is how elections should go and this is it. INEC needs more powers to be able to call bigger political parties to book. All these things are part of the problem, and they are the only ways to fix one is to kind of fix all too. So those are some of the suggestions. For anyone who wants more, I will send the link to the paper either here, or I will send it through our lovely host and they can disseminate. So you can read more on it. I would actually appreciate if you do that, because a lot of information is hiding in books, and I guess we kind of need to be better at reading. So I think that's all for me.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Miss Jessica Odudu. She has been our guest for today's exclusive interview, and we have been talking about corruption and conflicting judgments in electoral process and their impact on Nigeria's democracy. Ms. Odudu Esquire is a legal practitioner, a social justice advocate, programs officer for the Premium Times Center for Investigative Journalism. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this.
Please go ahead.
Oh no, I just wanted to say thanks everyone for listening. I'm seeing comments in the chat box, and I nod my head in agreement with some. And I just want to use the opportunity to remind everyone that Rome was not built in a day, and it definitely feels like we have a lot of work to do, but many hands make light work. So I hope everyone takes an opportunity to join in any way they can. Please get your PVCs, please read, please know who you're voting for, and just please be a part of the system. That is really the only way we can make things better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And remember that this interview was live streamed on YouTube. We'll send the link. The link is already in the chat box, but if you need it, you just reach out to us and we'll send it to you. It is also recorded, so you can also ask for that, and we will send it to you. And remember that we have another exclusive interview today by 8 p.m., 7 p.m. London time. And we're going to be talking about Nigeria 2023 rotating presidency. Is that the future for our Nigeria's democracy? We're going to be looking at the issues of zoning and what it means for us as a people. And from me, Augusta Neka, it's a good afternoon, and thank you so much for listening. Ms. Jessica, I already have your contact details, but I don't know if people may want it. You can just put it on the chat box and they may reach out to you in case you're also looking for ways to engage. I think that's also a good idea.
Okay, then I'm going to put my email. I think that should be good for first interfacing, and then we can continue the conversation from there. So I've just put it in the chat box for anyone who might want to reach out. Please do. I would love to. We can always engage on these conversations. And of course, we just started. A lot of this paper was just launched on Monday. And it's something we hope to continue. It's a conversation the PTCIJ wishes to take forward. And it's something that hopefully next year you should be seeing a lot more of in the space of media, which hopefully should help improve the collective awareness and consciousness of some key issues bedeviling the judiciary.
So, all right, and as you release more, hopefully we'll be able to get you to, to talk more about this judiciary issue and the the demystification of the judiciary. But thank you so much for coming. And for now, we'll have to let you go. Remember to also join us by 8 p.m. Like I said, we are talking about rotating presidency as an issue for Nigeria 2023. Thank you so much. And for me, it's good afternoon.
Thank you.